His name was David. He said he was a civil engineer, a widower building a bridge in a remote part of Malaysia. His messages were my lifeline, the one thing that filled the crushing silence of my house since my husband passed. He needed $10,000. A piece of critical equipment was being held up by a corrupt customs official, and he was in a jam. It was the third jam, in as many months, but this one, he promised, was the last hurdle before he could finally come home to me. I was sitting at my kitchen table, my finger hovering over the confirm transfer button, my heart at war with my brain. He thought I was just a lonely, retired schoolteacher, an easy mark. He had no idea that my daughter, my brilliant, fiercely protective daughter, was a senior engineer on Google's threat analysis group, the team of elite cyber detectives who literally hunt people like him for a living. And he certainly had no idea she was about to use the full, terrifying power of her global network to find him. This is the story of a man who targeted the wrong mother and a daughter, who was about to decompile his entire world. If you believe hell hath no fury like a tech-savvy daughter scorned, subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because you are about to witness a scammer get completely and globally debugged. Part 1. The email from David was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, a perfect blend of masculine vulnerability and urgent need. My dearest Eleanor, it began, I am so ashamed to have to ask you this, but I have nowhere else to turn. I read the words for the 10th time, the screen of my laptop glowing in the pre-dawn quiet of my Marin County home. The story was so detailed, so plausible. A critical turbine component for the bridge project, a corrupt local official, a facilitation fee that had to be paid in cash. $10,000. It was a lot of money, but it was a pittance compared to what I had already sent. My life, since my husband John had died of a sudden heart attack 2 years ago, had become a study in shades of gray. The vibrant colors of my life, my 40 years of teaching history, my travels with John, the joyful chaos of raising our daughter, Jessie, had all faded into a quiet, monotonous loneliness. The house, once filled with laughter, was now a silent museum of my past. It was into this silence that David's voice had arrived. A message on a bird-watching forum of all places. He was a widower, too. He understood the suffocating nature of grief. His messages, at first just friendly comments on a photo of a cedar waxwing I had posted, had blossomed into a daily correspondence that became the new anchor of my life. He was in Borneo, working on a massive infrastructure project. His profile picture was of a handsome, rugged-looking man in his late 50s, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. His emails were intelligent, witty, and deeply romantic. He sent me photos of exotic birds he had seen. He asked me about the books I was reading. He remembered the smallest details of my life. He made me feel like Eleanor again, not just Jessie's mom, or John's widow. He made me feel seen. The first request for money had been small, almost an afterthought. $500 for a new satellite phone after his fell off a barge. It was a test, I see now. A little hook to see if the fish would bite. I had sent it without a second thought. What was a few $100s to help the man who was rebuilding my heart? The requests had escalated slowly from there. A few thousand for a medical emergency for one of his crew, another few for visa complications. Each time, I had felt a small, sickening lurch of doubt in my gut. But his loving reassurances, his detailed, plausible stories, and my own desperate, aching need for him to be real, had always won. I had drained my emergency savings. I had started dipping into the retirement funds that John and I had so carefully built. I was a frog in a pot of slowly warming water, and I was about to be boiled alive. This latest request felt different. It was larger, more audacious. I sat there, staring at the screen, the cursor blinking on the confirm button. My common sense, the disciplined, logical mind of a history teacher who had taught her students to always check their sources, was screaming at me. But my heart, so starved for affection, was whispering, what if he's real? What if this is the last step before he finally comes home? The conflict was a physical thing, a tightening in my chest, a dryness in my mouth. He thought he was just making one more withdrawal. He had no idea he was about to trigger an alarm system he didn't even know existed. Part 2. My daughter, Jessica, or Jessie as she insisted, was a force of nature. She was a product of a different California than the one I knew. My world was the quiet, foggy coast, a life of books and nature walks. Her world was the relentless, sun-baked, data-driven meritocracy of Silicon Valley. She had her father's brilliant, logical mind, but with a sharp, cynical edge that was entirely her own. She had graduated from Stanford at 20, and had been recruited by Google before she had even picked up her diploma. Now at 32, she was a senior engineer on one of their most elite and secretive teams, the Threat Analysis Group, or TAG. I didn't fully understand what she did. It was a world of jargon I couldn't penetrate. She talked about state-sponsored phishing campaigns and zero-day exploits. All I knew was that she hunted the monsters of the digital world. She was a ghost in the machine, a digital warrior who fought battles on a global scale from a minimalist, standing desk in Mountain View. We were close, but our lives were so different. She was consumed by her high-stakes career, a world of constant deadlines and classified projects. I was retired, living a quiet life of gardening and volunteering at the local library. I was proud of her, immensely so, but I was also intimidated. How could I tell my brilliant, world-saving daughter that her mother was sending her retirement money to a man she had never met? A man who claimed to be building a bridge in Malaysia, but who couldn't manage a simple video call because of a bad satellite link? The shame of it was a wall between us. My hidden power was her. It was a resource I was terrified to use, because using it meant admitting my own foolishness, my own profound, embarrassing vulnerability. It meant admitting that I, the woman who had taught her to be strong and independent, had become a victim. The antagonist, David, was the perfect predator for a woman like me. He was not a flashy, obvious con artist. He was a craftsman of deceit. His persona, the intelligent, competent, slightly lonely older man, was a mirror of the husband I had lost. He didn't just flatter me, he engaged with my intellect. He discussed history with me, he commented on articles I sent him. He had built a profile of me, understood my loneliness, my academic nature, and my grief, and had created a character perfectly designed to bypass my defenses. He was a professional, a member of a global network of scammers who use sophisticated psychological techniques to groom their victims. He saw a retired teacher in a wealthy zip code and saw a high-value, low-risk target. He had no idea that his target had a daughter who had access to the most powerful digital surveillance and data analysis tools on the planet. He thought he was a lone wolf, hunting a sheep. He had no idea he was about to wander into the crosshairs of a dragon. Part 3. Instead of clicking confirm, I did something else. I took a screenshot of the email. I saved it to a folder on my desktop, a folder I had secretly started a week ago, a folder named Garden Photos. It was a small act of rebellion against my own foolishness, a tiny, scientific part of my brain that was beginning to fight back. I then replied to David. My dearest, I wrote, this is a lot of money. The bank is asking for more information before they will release it. Can you send me some official documentation about the project? Something I can show them? It was a lie, of course. The bank wasn't asking for anything. I was. His response was immediate and slightly irritated, the first crack in his perfectly charming facade. Eleanor, my love, you know how sensitive this project is. There is no official documentation I can send that wouldn't violate my non-disclosure agreement. It's a matter of trust. Don't you trust me? The guilt trip was a familiar tactic. But this time it didn't work. The conflict had shifted. It was no longer just a battle in my own heart. It was now a quiet digital chess match. The obstacle was his wall of secrecy, his refusal to provide a single, verifiable fact. So, I decided to go around the wall. I spent the next 2 days in a state of feverish, clandestine research. I was a historian again, piecing together a narrative from scattered, incomplete sources. I took the one piece of information he had given me that felt real. The name of the bridge project in Malaysia. I scoured engineering journals, Malaysian government websites, international construction forums. For 48 hours, I found nothing. It was as if the project didn't exist. My heart sank. It was all a lie. The whole thing. But then I found it. A tiny, obscure mention in the online archives of a Malaysian newspaper. The project was real. But it had been completed 6 months ago. The article included a photo of the ribbon-cutting ceremony. And standing in the back row, smiling, was the handsome, rugged, silver-haired man from David's profile picture. The caption identified him not as David, but as a Norwegian project manager named Henrik Larsson. My David was not just a liar. He had stolen a real man's face, a real man's life. I felt not heartbreak, but a surge of pure, cold adrenaline. The grief was gone, replaced by the thrill of the hunt. I had my first, concrete, irrefutable piece of evidence. The conflict was no longer about a man who was lying to me. It was about a criminal I was going to expose. The smart plan was beginning to form. I was not just going to stop sending money. I was going to find out who had been stealing it. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and made the most difficult call of my life. "Jessie," I said when she answered. "I need your help. I've done something very, very stupid." Part 4. The silence on the other end of the line after I told Jessie the story was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. I braced myself for the "I told you so," for the anger, for the disappointment. Instead, her voice, when it came, was quiet, low, and absolutely lethal. "Mom," she said, "I am going to find this man. And I am going to burn his entire world to the ground." The subplot of our mother-daughter relationship was instantly reforged. The distance, the shame, it all evaporated, replaced by an unbreakable alliance. Jessie's apartment in Palo Alto became our new war room. The ticking clock was the speed at which the scammer could disappear, could scrub his digital footprint, and vanish with my money. "These guys have a playbook," Jessie explained, her fingers flying across a keyboard, 3 different monitors displaying cascading lines of code. "They hit a target for everything they can. Then they disappear and re-emerge with a new identity. We have a very small window." The complexity of the hunt was immense. The scammer had used a sophisticated web of VPNs, encrypted messaging apps, and spoofed email headers to mask his location. He was a professional. But he had made one mistake. He had underestimated his target's daughter. Jessie was not just a tech worker. She was a digital bloodhound. She explained that she couldn't use Google's official resources. That would be illegal. But she could use her knowledge, her own private network of contacts in the white hat hacking community. Our plan was twofold. First, my role was to keep David on the hook. I had to continue the performance, to make him believe I was still trying to get the $10,000 together. I sent him messages full of feigned frustration with the bureaucratic bank. Every message I sent, every reply he sent back, was a new data point for Jessie, another digital breadcrumb she could use to trace him. Second, Jessie was going to perform what she called digital archaeology. She was going to analyze every pixel of every photo he had ever sent me, every fragment of code and every email header, looking for a single, tiny mistake. The pressure was immense. It was a race against time, a high-stakes, global manhunt orchestrated from a quiet suburban living room. Part 5. For a week, the hunt was a frustrating series of dead ends. The digital trail was a phantom, leading to server farms in Russia and then vanishing. David was getting impatient, his messages becoming more demanding, less charming. My performance as the loving, flustered victim was getting harder to maintain. The turning point came not from a line of code, but from a photograph. It was a picture he had sent me months ago, a picture of his dog, a beautiful Australian shepherd, sitting on a balcony. "Missing my boy Max," the caption had read. At the time, it was just another layer of his fictional, relatable persona. Now it was a piece of evidence. Jessie had been running a sophisticated image analysis program on it for days, looking for any scrap of usable data. And she found it. "Got him," she said, her voice a low, triumphant whisper in the quiet of my living room. I rushed over to her laptop. She pointed to a tiny, almost invisible reflection in the dog's eye. It was a distorted, fisheye view of the room behind the photographer. She ran in. "The men in the black van across the street are very, very real. And they have a high-resolution recording of this entire conversation." The vengeance was complete. Not with a shout, but with a quiet, devastating recitation of facts. I had not just caught him. I had dissected him, laid bare the pathetic, fraudulent pieces of his life for him to see, just before it was all taken away. Part 10. Michael Thorne did not go to jail that day, not in the traditional sense. We did not call the police. The justice we delivered was far more personal. The security team escorted him from the park. An hour later, his wife was paid a visit. She was presented with a file containing the full, irrefutable evidence of her husband's crimes, his secret life, and the source of their income. She was also presented with a choice: cooperate, or be named as a co-conspirator. She cooperated. The long-term consequence for Michael was a different kind of prison. He lost everything. His wife divorced him, taking the condo and everything in it. His name and face were quietly circulated through a network of online watchdog groups, blacklisting him from the world of online dating scams forever. He was left with nothing but his own pathetic self. A significant portion of my money was recovered, wired back to me from his wife's now-frozen accounts. The emotional resolution for me was not in his ruin, but in the quiet, profound victory of my own competence. I had not been a victim. I had been a historian, a researcher, and in the end a hunter. A month later, I was in my daughter's apartment. We were looking at a file she had put together, a list of other women Michael had been grooming. What should we do? I asked. Jessie smiled. I think, she said, Aunt Helen needs a new hobby. We started a small, anonymous foundation, the Bridge Project, dedicated to proactively identifying and warning women who were being targeted by these scammers. My pain had become a shield for others. My story had become a weapon. The internet can be a wonderful place to find connection, but it can also be a hunting ground for predators who prey on loneliness and trust. This story is a powerful reminder to always be cautious, to listen to that small voice of doubt, and to never, ever be afraid to ask for help from the people who love you. Have you ever encountered a fake profile or a suspected scammer online? Share your story and your red flags in the comments below to help protect our community. If this story of a mother and daughter who fought back resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Undistorting algorithm. The image sharpened. It was still blurry, but two things were clear: a window, and through the window, a sliver of a distinctive, bright red building. And on the coffee table in front of the dog, a takeout coffee cup with a partially visible logo. The building isn't enough, she said, but the logo. I recognize it. It's from a small local coffee chain in San Diego. This was it. The bridge in Malaysia, the oil rig in Scotland, it was all a lie. He was here. He was in California. This changed everything. Jessie immediately focused her search, cross-referencing everything she knew with cell tower data and IP addresses originating from the San Diego area. The power dynamic had just been completely, irrevocably shattered. The global phantom was now a local target. Jessie's fingers flew across the keyboard. Okay, Mom, she said, her voice tight with a cold, controlled fury. I have him. I have his real name. I have his address. He lives in a condo in La Jolla. And now, she said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face, we are going to have some fun. The vengeance was no longer just about finding him. It was about setting a trap. Part 6. The man's real name was Michael Thorne. He was not a widower. He was a married, 45-year-old failed real estate agent who had discovered that scamming lonely women online was far more profitable. The condo in La Jolla was in his wife's name. The consequence of this discovery was that the plan shifted from a digital hunt to a real-world operation. Jessie, using her network, found out everything about him. He was a creature of habit. He went to the same coffee shop every morning. He walked his dog, the real Max, on the same stretch of beach every afternoon. He was not a criminal mastermind. He was just a lazy, arrogant predator. My role in the new plan was crucial. I had to be the bait one last time. We crafted a new message for me to send to David. My dearest, it read, I have a surprise. I've sold some of my late husband's art collection. I have the money, all of it, and more. But I'm too afraid to wire it. I'm going to be in San Diego next week, visiting an old friend. Can we meet? I can give it to you in person. It was a risky move, one that could spook him. But his greed, we gambled, would override his caution. The repercussion for him was that he took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. My brave, wonderful Eleanor. He wrote back. You are coming to me. This is the most wonderful news in the world. He agreed to meet me at a specific, quiet park overlooking the cliffs in La Jolla. He thought he was about to receive the biggest payday of his life. He had no idea he was walking into the most elaborate sting operation his victim and her daughter could devise. Part 7. My growth in this phase was in my transformation from a digital ghost into a physical warrior. The challenge was immense. I had to overcome the very real, very physical fear of meeting the man who had so thoroughly violated my trust. He was not just a picture on a screen anymore. He was a real person, a criminal, and I was about to confront him. Jessie's support was my rock. "You are not going in there alone, Mom," she stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. Our roles were reversed. She was now the fierce, protective parent, and I was the one being guided. My transformation was in my acceptance of her strength, in my willingness to be a part of a team. We prepared for the meeting like a military operation. Jessie contacted a retired FBI agent she knew, a friend of her father's, who now worked as a private security consultant. He helped us plan. I would wear a wire. He and a small team would be parked nearby, monitoring the entire encounter. We were not going to the police, not yet. This was personal. This was not about a legal arrest. This was about a final, personal reckoning. I had to overcome the lifetime of conditioning that had taught me to be polite, to be non-confrontational. I had to find the cold, hard anger that I had been suppressing, and I had to be ready to use it. I was no longer a victim. I was the architect of his downfall. Part 8. The day of the meeting was a perfect, sunny San Diego day. The park in La Jolla was beautiful, the view of the Pacific breathtaking. It was a perfect setting for a final, ugly act. I sat on a bench, a large, empty handbag sitting next to me. In my ear, I could hear the calm, steady voice of the security consultant, a quiet hum of reassurance. "We have eyes on you, Eleanor. You're not alone." I saw him walking towards me. He was not the man from the pictures. He was older, paunchier, with the soft, dissipated look of a man who lived an easy, dishonest life. But the smile as he approached was the same charming, predatory curve of the lips. He was carrying a small bouquet of cheap flowers. The final, pathetic insult. My preparation for this climax was the single, laminated photograph I had in my pocket. It was the picture of the real Henrik Larsson, the Norwegian engineer whose face he had stolen. The tension was not in what he would do, but in the slow, delicious, and methodical way I was about to dismantle his entire reality, piece by piece. Part 9. "Eleanor," he said, his voice the same smooth, practiced baritone from his messages. He sat down next to me, a little too close. "You look even more beautiful in person." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, my expression a mask of cold, quiet observation. "So," he said, his eyes darting to the large handbag, "did you bring it?" "I did," I said. "But first I brought you something." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the laminated photograph of the real Henrik Larsson. I handed it to him. He took it, a confused frown on his face. "Who's this?" he asked. "That," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the ocean below us, "is David. The man I fell in love with. The widower. The engineer from Borneo. You, on the other hand. I have no idea who you are." The climax was the look on his face. The charming mask disintegrated, replaced by a flash of pure, animal panic. He looked from the photo to me, his mind scrambling, the gears of his fraudulent world grinding to a halt. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "Oh, I think you do, Michael," I said, using his real name. The sound of it made him flinch as if I had struck him. "I know about the condo in your wife's name. I know about Max, the Australian shepherd. I know about the coffee shop. And my daughter, the one who works for Google's threat analysis group? She knows about the servers in Russia and the money laundering accounts in Cyprus." With every word he shrank. The confident predator was gone, replaced by a pale, sweating, pathetic little man. He started to stand up, to flee. "I wouldn't do that," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Because